Well, hey kids, Rio here. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. So today is Wednesday. So of course today is next in my series of film reviews. We're gonna start a holiday series now. We just finished a Halloween series. We're gonna kind of go into more of the winter holidays now. So what we're gonna do today is we're going to start with a Thanksgiving special that I don't know if a lot of people have seen this. It's sort of kind of rare. We'll talk a bit about it, but we'll be talking about the 1968 Rankin Bass animated special, Mouse on the Mayflower.
It's a fun-loving Thanksgiving celebration with the Mouse on the Mayflower. A holiday special for the whole family. Today at 5 on Fox 32.
This is the tale of the Mayflower crossing from Europe to the New World. But being told from the perspective of a little mouse who is on board the ship traveling with the Puritans to the Virginia colonies. This is an interesting special. Couple of bits of trivia real quick. Let's kind of get these out of the way. So, as I said, this came out in 1968. So one can kind of assume that certain, politically correct sensitivities are not necessarily in place. Okay. So we'll just throw that out there right from the beginning. Another interesting thing about this too, is that this is actually, the first, official Rankin Bass, special. That is to say that when they were founded in 1960 as Videocraft International, this was actually the first special that they did that actually had the little Rankin Bass logo that came at the end. That's kind of a little bit, I don't know how important that is, but kind of cool. And also kind of throwing it out there too, is that this is not one that airs very often. And in fact, it is relatively rare. This one is hard to find. The last time it actually aired on television was in 2019, as far as I know, on the Freeform network. Part of their 25 Days of Christmas that they do, it was actually, 2019 actually corresponded to the 50th anniversary of the special's production. So they aired it during their series of events then, because they aired a lot of the Rankin Bass ones. But this one was actually one of the very few specials that when they started restoring all the old Rankin Bass holiday specials and stuff for a DVD release, there are, of course, whole collections of their work now. But this was one of the specials, and in fact, as far as I know, it's the only one, that was not restored and made a part of their continuing catalog. So the only copies you can actually find of this would have been released on VHS previous to 1998. And of course, are unrestored. Is that to say you can't find it? It's nowhere on streaming or anything that I can find. I did find it, on Dailymotion, if you're familiar with that site. The entire special, with some of the early bumpers and everything too, is on Dailymotion. And, there is a version on YouTube that is complete, but dubbed entirely in German. So, there's a couple options to see it. But I don't think it'd be that hard if you go through collectors. You might be able to find like the old VHS copies, or possibly where someone may have done home burns from those to DVD. So you can find it, but you really got to work for it. The other end of this, by the way, it's actually kind of important, is it's relatively historically accurate. I say relatively. It very generally addresses the hardships of the Puritans as they crossed over to the New World. And it kind of touches on the reasons that they left Europe in the first place. Anyway, there's a lot of nuance to this story that certainly we have come to learn over generations. So I'll leave that to you to figure that part out. Yeah, all of these characters that are in this thing, for the most part, were people that were actually on the Mayflower. So John Alden, William Bradford, of course, Captain Standish, right? Victoria Collins. These are all actual people. A little bit of liberty is taken, of course, in how the characters interact with each other. and so forth. But considering the story is being told by a mouse, it gives you a very general aspect of the tale and of what it was like. We're not going to talk too much about the treatment of the Native Americans, only because this is something of its time. So character designs and names and other things could be a little cringy based on modern sensibilities. Some of it might be like, oh no, which, having not watched it in years, and I watched it again, and I am in fact half Native American, so I was like, ooh, yikes. But let's face it, we've heard a million of these Thanksgiving stories, where that is pretty much exactly how the Native Americans were addressed. So we're just going to chalk that up to being of its time, and we're not going to get too offended by it. They actually do mention the Mayflower Compact. Those of us who remember our early history classes in school would have read at least somewhat about the Mayflower Compact, which was essentially a precursor to things like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, which was basically an agreed upon understanding of rules for their new colony. So yeah, it does touch upon the actual history with a little bit of embellishment here and there. There is a very bizarre sequence where there is this like courtship thing that happens with John Alden and Victoria, where it's basically they've animated Cinderella with the fairy godmother and stuff. It's one of those things you just have to kind of ride it out. Remember, it's from its time, and don't get too upset about it. I said the treatment of the Native Americans is questionable. But it's actually a really interesting thing to watch because it does give you the basics of the history, and I think that's important. So as I've mentioned previously, talking about Rankin Bass, they were one of the first American companies to actually sort of farm like animation and stuff overseas. It wasn't really a common practice back then. Well, in this case, this film is not animagic, as I said. This is standard animation. This is traditional animation, hand-drawn, all of that, cell by cell. It was done by a Japanese animation company called Toei Animation. Boy, I hope I pronounced that right. They were founded in 1948. They still, work to this day. They still have things that come out. Just sort of an example of some of the things that you would know from Toei Animation, especially if you're an anime nerd like myself. So we're going to talk about things like Galaxy Express 999, Sailor Moon, let me see what else we got. Dragon Ball Z, actually, One Piece, Digimon, and actually Transformers between 84 and 1990. And there are lots of Japanese exclusives as well. But this is Toei Animation, and you have seen a million things by them. That's just tip of the iceberg. If you are a fan of Japanese style animation, of anime, then you will definitely recognize that style when you watch the special. Okay, so let's move on to cast and crew on this. As I've mentioned previously in talking about Rankin Bass specials, a lot of these people have kind of long left us, shuffled off this mortal coil, as they say. So, I'll address that as necessary. Try not to repeat myself as I reference the same people, because again, Rankin Bass Studios kept a very talented core group, that did writing, directing, score composing, and then they brought other people in as they came along. But they had this very core group that did everything. So, keeping that in mind, the film was directed by Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass. Rankin Bass. Okay, they were also the producers on this thing. But they were also the directors as well. Now, interestingly enough, I haven't mentioned this man before. The writer for this particular special was a man named Romeo Muller. Romeo Muller was literally a house writer for Rankin Bass. He wrote on so many of not just the Christmas specials, but like movies and things they did too. There's a couple of examples. Of course, in specials, we're talking Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. We're talking Frosty the Snowman, Frosty's Winter Wonderland. Here Comes Peter Cottontail, if you remember their Easter specials. We'll talk about them in the spring. But he was also the writer on Wind in the Willows, A Flight of Dragons, and actually wrote an episode of Thundercats back in 1987. Completely extra bonus trivia. Did you know that the original Thundercats TV series was a Rankin Bass production? The more you know. So the score was done by Maury Laws, the late Maury Laws, who, of course, was, again, the in-house score composer for pretty much everything Rankin Bass. But interestingly enough, he passed away in 2019, but you would have actually seen his work as late as 2019. He was a score composer for Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So he was working right up to the end. Respect. Apropos of nothing, he was also contributed to the score for Batman and Robin. That is to say, the Batman and Robin from 1997. So you will find his name attached to a lot of things, not just Rankin Bass. So now let's get to our cast. Now, of course, as I've said before with Rankin Bass, they have their core group of people, but then they bring in various writers, celebrity voices, narrators, and so forth. Well, in the case of this special, our guest voice is Tennessee Ernie Ford. Now, if you don't know who he is, he was a very, very well-known gospel and traditional music performer. If I say the word 16 tons.
You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt.
That is Tennessee Ernie Ford. Tennessee Ernie Ford is also the voice of our eponymous narrator, Willem Mouse Esquire. And Tennessee Ernie Ford sings a lot of the songs in this particular show. And there are a lot of songs in this particular one. More than the usual. But there's a lot of songs in this one. He performs most of them. And of course, unfortunately, Tennessee Ernie Ford did pass away. He passed away in 1991. But this is a man with a solid career, and trust me, you know who he is. Now we'll go into some of the historical characters. And like I said, a lot of these characters they are real people that are documented to have been on the Mayflower. Again, the story kind of takes some liberties, but let's address the voices, okay? So of course we have Captain Standish. Captain Standish is being voiced by Eddie Albert. Eddie Albert, who passed away in 2005, but you would know this man. Let me just give you a couple movie titles and we'll call it a day. Roman Holiday in 1953, Oklahoma, 1955, Tea House of the August Moon, 1956, The Longest Yard, 1974, and of course, Escape to Witch Mountain, which was always a favorite of mine, the original one, of course, from 1975. And some of you of a certain age would absolutely recognize Eddie Albert from the TV series Green Acres.
Land spreading out so far and wide. Keep Manhattan, just give me that countryside.
Then we have the other character, which is John Alden. John Alden, again, historically, was someone who was on the Mayflower. John Alden is being voiced by an actor named John Gary. He was actually one of RCA Victor's most popular recording artists back in the 1960s. He was in movies, he sang on Broadway, performed at Carnegie Hall. This guy, hella career, even appeared in a bunch of like network variety shows back in the 70s, if you remember those. And again, of course, he had passed away in 1998. Then we have Priscilla Collins. We have Priscilla, again, historical character. She is being voiced by Joni Summers. Joni Summers is still alive. Still alive. She's 83 years old and sometimes still performs in nightclubs if she's so inclined. She's another one that was a big pop sensation in the 1960s. I don't have any specific singles that she did, but she did appear in TV shows such as Love American Style, The Wild Wild West, and 77 Sunset Strip, if anybody's old enough to remember that show. So again, you know, a known celebrity, still alive. We also have an additional character named Charity, kind of a standard Puritan name, isn't it? Apropos of nothing, this isn't the only character in the show that is voiced by the legendary June Foray. Come on, you know who June Foray is, right? It's Rocket J. Squirrel, it's Granny, it's Tweety Bird. You know who June Foray is. She actually does about 3 or 4 characters in this, and you can't help but hear June Foray. And of course, I've mentioned before, June Foray did pass away in 2017. And then you got a whole bunch of other voices. A whole gaggle of characters, background characters, extra characters that don't necessarily get names. Of course, the legendary Paul Frees. You know, again, he was a kind of stable member, voice talent, for Rankin Bass. This guy could do pretty much anything. And I have mentioned before, of course, that he has passed away. He passed away in 1986. But a couple places you would actually recognize him outside of Rankin Bass. So if you remember the old, Rocky and Bullwinkle show from back in the day, he was Boris Badenov. That's one of his characters. He also, if you're familiar with another Rankin Bass production, that is to say The Last Unicorn. Everybody, come on. He was in The Last Unicorn. He is the voice of King Haggard's magician. And also of the cat. The great pirate cat. That's all Paul Frees. Very much like Frank Welker. Or Mel Blanc. Man of a Thousand Voices. And pretty much appeared in everything. So if you can find this thing, it's definitely kind of worth looking at, I think. Like I said, just remember you're going to have to do a little more research to kind of fill out the gaps. All right, kids, I guess that's it for me on this one. We're going to continue with the holiday series. We're going to be doing a bunch of stuff from this point forward. We're going to look at some more Rankin Bass stuff, some of the rarer Rankin Bass stuff, and some other things. So not everything's going to be family friendly, just so you know that. So if you want to join me for this is kind of fun. There's a button here somewhere. There's a like and subscribe. You'll get notifications of when I do new stuff. And you can join me on my deep dive into my weirdo holiday rarities. So hopefully we will see you again and see what comes up next.